resilience is something that people from all sorts of fields can talk about. So engineering, ecology, psychology, education, business, definitely. I will be talking about biopsychosocial resilience, so basically resilience of people and their lives. But before I do, I would like to ask you all a question. And the lights are very bright, so I can hardly see you. But yes, you are there. That's good. Have a look at this slide. And it's okay, there are two young people. And my research was with the young people. And this is how they define their lives and themselves. Okay? So, moved around, lost friends, experienced abuse, experienced neglect, ran away, shy, scared, quiet, missed a year of school, did nothing, brewed aggressive emotion. If you could just do a show of hands, who would describe these people as vulnerable, potentially? Okay, thank you. And let's have a look at the next slide. So also two young people. And this is what they say. University students, volunteer, want to give back, know what I want to do, help others. We can create our own opportunities. Would you go as far as describing someone like that as resilient? And again, if you could just raise your hands, please, that would be lovely. Thank you. Well, if you haven't guessed it yet, I would like to tell you that these are the same people. Okay? And yes, and I still am, actually still I'm getting an emotional reaction when I talk about it. I was really, really honored to actually meet these young people and to interview them. Right, so that's quite tricky then, isn't it? What is resilience then, I suppose? Well, I'll start slightly from afar, shall I say. I would like, before I start to talk about resilience, I would like to introduce the notion of risk as well, and I'll tell you in a minute why. So, if we, as human beings, as a society, we've been very, very good at actually identifying risk, okay? Something unpleasant hits us, we will want to make sure it's not happened to us again. It's just natural, okay? So, we are good at remembering what's been bad and trying to avoid it. At the same time, it's much harder to focus on the positives and work towards those, or actually introduce them into our lives. Okay? Not as easy. They're also actually probably more difficult to define. But what's wrong with it? First of all, if we try to avoid risk, there is no guarantee we avoid it, although we can succeed. But also, and I'm going to quote Sheldon Cooper here from The Big Bang Theory, which I wasn't planning on until last minute, is someone asks, I think Penny asks him, are you happy now? And he goes, I'm not unhappy. So by avoiding the risk, we actually don't guarantee it for ourselves that we will bring something good into the life. They're two different things. Another problem with it is that when we focus on the risks, we utilize something that's known as a deficit model. We focus, if it's about us or about other people, we focus on something we're lacking or someone else is lacking. And it's not really that nice, is it, to do it a lot? It probably won't feel that good. At the same time, when we focus on stuff that would come under resilience, we utilize something that's known as a strength-focused model. Okay, so we're looking at our own strengths and other people's strengths, which is lovely. So, and I would like to just define these things a little bit more. So really, just like we looked at the young people who have defined, who you could describe as vulnerable, and many people would. And in fact, this is what sort of the policy, British, social policy, government policy would encourage us to do anyway. This is how, some groups are defined. Really what we're talking about is exposure to harm or adversity. This is really broadly what we could call risk. At the same time, resilience is positive adaptation in the face of risk, in the face of adversity. So they are quite connected, aren't they? We are exposed to harm and we may come out on the other side and actually discover we're resilient. And also, yes, going back to the vulnerability as well, it's very important if we think that somebody may be vulnerable, we do not strip them off of their strength, okay? That we don't mean by that that they're helpless or unable to do something. I would like us to decide that really what we will mean is that they may be susceptible to slightly more negative outcomes just because their lives have been tough. And this is why they're entitled to our support. So if resilience is positive adaptation in the face of risk, what is not resilience? It's not being invulnerable, it's not being invincible, it's not being hard and tough. It's not something that we either have or we don't have, and it's definitely not something where we do well when there is no risk, because actually, how will we know? Yeah? Am I trying to say that maybe there may be no resilience without risk? And am I trying to say that it's something everybody has or can develop further? Well, I'd like to say yes, that's what I'm saying. Going back to the young people I've interviewed, so it was a group of 19 young people of different ages. They may remind you of some people you know, and especially if there are parents here, some things may resonate as we go on with this talk. I asked them to do 2 things in the interview. I asked them to describe themselves sometime, sort of go back in their memory and describe themselves sometime prior to the interview that I had with them. For some it was several months, for some it was several years, to actually get that retrospective picture of their lives. And this is what they said. So it's just an infographic representing their own opinions of themselves. And obviously the bigger words are the most commonly used words. Shy, quiet, nervous, miserable, scared, rude. There's some adventurous in there, and aggressive and bored, and some others. So I asked them the same question, but about that particular time when I interviewed them. So at that time it was the present time, okay? Same people. Very different answers, as you can see. So what happened? And yes, we could just say, obviously, you know, these are adolescents. Well, most of them were adolescents in those times. So we're talking about human development. Lots of stuff is happening. You know, they're developing, they're impressionable, etc. But because I was looking at these young people in terms of resilience, there's such a thing as risk and protective factors. So risk factors is obviously what's going to push us closer to the negative outcomes, and protective factors is what's going to make us more resilient. And this is what they taught me about, and this is what, from everything they've sort of said, this is what came through as stuff that held them together. In the next slide in a minute. And these are the young people who had very tough lives. Some of them went through the care system, foster caring, children's homes. Some of them were moved out of mainstream schools into special schools and referral units. And these things actually are not necessarily bad things, but normally when they happen, there would have been quite a lot of bad stuff before that would happen. So for their age, they've experienced quite a lot, okay, compared to many of their peers. So risk factors were high, basically. But this is what they identified as stuff that kept them going. And I think this is very important for, you know, for parents and for ourselves as individuals, for ourselves as well. 1, participating in stuff that develops us in a meaningful way. What do I mean by meaningful way? If I don't like football, putting me in a football team may not work for me, actually. It needs to be something I love, something that makes me tick. Taking managed risks. They've already had a lot of risk in their life, but it probably wasn't managed. It was too high for them to cope with sometimes. So we're talking supportive situations where somebody is there mentoring them through the process, letting them grow, but it's still challenging enough. So it's between, you know, being too hard and too boring, that sort of balance. Easily said than done, right? The second one, support networks. Doesn't matter where. If, you know, could be school, family, anywhere, it doesn't matter, as long as there is that person or ideally several people who care for you, and they're not there just tomorrow. They're there over a period of time. Very, very important. something that's known as agency in social science, but basically what it means is kind of a mixture of self-awareness and confidence and sort of feeling competent about things. So where, for example, from feeling good and confident about myself, I feel good enough to actually help others. So it's a whole next level, right? And also feeling in control of own lives, right? Not that the school controls my life or my family controls my life or somebody else or the system. I'm in control of my life. And for these young people especially, it's very important. Positive emotionality, how we react to things, yes? Whether it's an emotion, sort of it's a negative reaction or if it's a positive reaction, and actually understanding it, noticing it when we do it. And the last but definitely not least is social competence. Different from being an extrovert, okay? Don't have to be an extrovert, but it's actually how comfortable we are next to people we don't know, how comfortable we are meeting people we don't know. And I've promised that in the little abstract for the brochure that it's going to be, that I will give you some hot tips on what could that actually mean for us, for each one of us, and for maybe for people who we love and for people around us. So these are my hot tips, and in resilience literature they're known as ordinary magic. You don't need to leave this room and do something new and amazing that's going to take up all your energy, and you'll have to give stuff up. It's actually looking at what we already do every day from a very different angle. So looking at everything we do and say and people around us and recognizing the power of these things in terms of our resilience building. Like, there are people in your lives who make you happy. There's stuff you do that makes you happy. Make sure you're really aware of that and make sure that whatever comes into your life, you will keep those people and those things. You will not lose connection with that because that's your protective factor. Take opportunities that make you grow. I think today is one of those opportunities, definitely, for sure. And learn to recognize your achievements. Again, something we've heard before, but again, we're looking at it actually, it's a protective factor to build your resilience. Empower yourself by empowering others. It's not only because it's a good thing and you're helping someone else, but actually it's really developing you. It's building up your resilience. It's giving you that power. It is absolutely true that you may be acting in a very resilient way when you think you are actually not coping. Okay, it's just in a tough situation, you may be thinking you're really rubbish, but actually you're doing brilliantly. And I think we are much better at saying this to other people than saying it to ourselves when it's difficult. So that's an interesting one as well. The last one means that for every bad thing, there could be a seemingly unrelated good thing that will shift the balance. So basically, there will be things in our lives that are not going great, but we may not have control over that. It doesn't mean that we have to fix that particular thing to make it right. Doing something that makes us feel good and something amazing elsewhere may just naturally shift the balance. And that's quite fascinating, isn't it? So that's kind of, instead of focusing on the risk too much, allowing yourself to build the resilience in other areas of your life, really. And this is what's going to keep us going. That's kind of the message for today. I hope that you'll get home and maybe something you do and say, you will see it in different light, or someone next to you, the things they do. And resilience is the word to stay here because it's really penetrating not just scientific literature, but also government policy. We'll wait and see what that means. And just normal human conversations as well. So I hope that's a word you may be using a little bit more often after today. Thank you.